Someone with your rank shouldn't even touch that rifle. The words cut across the range so cleanly that conversations stopped before the echo faded. A few heads turned. A few people smiled. Most pretended not to listen while listening to everything. Master Sergeant Evelyn Carter stood beside the long-range firing lane with her hearing protection hanging around her neck and a data card clipped to her sleeve. She didn't react. Her eyes stayed on the rifle case in front of her. Lieutenant Ryan Mercer took 2 slow steps closer and looked at the name tape again as if he expected it to change. Master Sergeant. His mouth curved slightly. Not enough to look rude on paper. Enough to make everyone understand. That's it, he said. No offense, but I expected more. Nobody said anything. Morning light stretched across the training ground and reflected off rows of steel targets placed from 100 yards out to nearly 1,000. Qualification day always attracted attention. People remembered scores. People remembered mistakes. And people especially remembered moments when someone embarrassed themselves. Ryan folded his arms. 29 years old. New transfer. Fast promotion track. Smart. Confident. Maybe too confident. He looked at Evelyn and saw someone smaller than expected, standing quietly beside equipment that looked too serious for her. She wore no special patch. No dramatic expression. No attempt to command attention. Just a faded cap, standard issue boots, and calm eyes that gave nothing away. You know, Ryan said loudly enough for nearby soldiers to hear. Experience usually shows up in rank eventually. A few uncomfortable laughs appeared. One soldier looked down immediately after. Another kept adjusting his gloves like he suddenly had somewhere else to be. Evelyn opened the rifle case. Inside sat a precision rifle laid out with careful order. Nothing flashy. Everything clean. She checked the chamber. Checked the optic. Adjusted nothing. Ryan watched her movements and gave a small shrug. I'm just saying. People throw around titles in this field. Sniper this. Expert that. Real respect has standards. Still nothing from her. She closed the bolt and looked through the optic for less than 2 seconds before stepping back. Ryan tilted his head. Not talking. Evelyn finally looked at him. No irritation. No challenge. Just direct eye contact. I usually wait until people finish introducing themselves. A few soldiers looked away to hide smiles. Ryan gave a short laugh. Fair enough. He nodded toward the rifle. But come on. Master Sergeant carrying a setup like that doesn't exactly match. Evelyn held his gaze another second. Then she asked quietly, Lieutenant, are you sure you want to keep going? Her voice was calm. Not cold. Not threatening. That almost made it worse. Ryan smiled wider. I think we're all thinking the same thing. He turned slightly toward the group gathering behind him. Nothing wrong with asking questions. Nobody answered. Nobody supported him either. The silence changed shape. Evelyn glanced once toward the digital clock mounted near the range office. Then back at Ryan. She gave one small nod as if confirming something only she understood. She closed the rifle case halfway and stepped aside. Understood, she said. Ryan relaxed immediately. He mistook acceptance for surrender. Around them, more personnel quietly stopped what they were doing and started watching. Nobody knew exactly why, but something in the air had shifted. And for the first time that morning, Evelyn Carter looked less like someone being judged and more like someone waiting for time to do the talking. Ryan Mercer had learned something early in his career and repeated it often enough that it started sounding like truth. If someone was exceptional, everyone would already know their name. The military rewarded performance. Rank reflected value. Recognition followed results. That belief had served him well in classrooms, evaluations, and promotions. Standing on the range that morning, he did not realize he had just met the first person in years who did not fit his system. Evelyn Carter stood beside the partially closed rifle case and watched the range with the same expression she had worn since arriving. Neutral, alert, unhurried. Around them, people continued preparing equipment, but the rhythm had changed. More eyes drifted toward their lane than toward their own assignments. Nobody wanted to look obvious. Everyone wanted to see what happened next. Ryan noticed it and straightened slightly. Attention always made him sharper. He pointed toward the firing positions. So what exactly is your role here? Evelyn looked at the distant steel targets. Today. Ryan nodded. She answered, same as everyone else. Show up. Do the work. He gave a quick laugh. Come on. You know what I mean. She turned and faced him fully for the first time. No, I do not. He exhaled through his nose. People usually talk, especially in specialized fields. Evelyn said nothing. Ryan continued. Awards, schools, assignments. Somebody always mentions something. She studied him for a second and asked, and if they do not? He shrugged. Then maybe there is not much to mention. Several nearby soldiers suddenly became very interested in adjusting gear they had already adjusted twice. Evelyn noticed. Ryan did not. She rested one hand lightly on the rifle case. You seem confident. Ryan smiled immediately. Should I not be? She nodded once. Confidence is useful. Then she looked back toward the range. The answer sounded agreeable. Somehow it felt like a warning. A sergeant from another lane walked past, saw Evelyn, slowed for half a second, then kept walking without speaking. Ryan caught it. You know him? Evelyn replied. Not really. Which was true in the way mountains are not really connected to rivers. Ryan folded his arms again. Interesting. He looked toward the target field. Tell me something honestly. How far do you actually shoot? No hesitation. As far as the mission requires. Ryan smiled again. That sounds rehearsed. Evelyn did not answer. A gust of wind moved across the open range. Flags shifted. Dust lifted briefly from the gravel. She looked at the movement automatically and made a tiny adjustment to the position of the rifle case. Ryan noticed. You checking wind? She said. Habit. He glanced at the target board. You do not need that for qualification distances. Evelyn answered quietly. Depends who is shooting. That got one short laugh from somewhere behind them. Ryan turned. Nobody admitted it. His expression tightened for the first time. He stepped closer. Not aggressive. Just determined to recover control of the conversation. Look, Master Sergeant, maybe I came off wrong earlier. But people earn credibility. That is all I am saying. Evelyn looked at him for a moment. Then she asked, Lieutenant Mercer, how long have you been in? 7 years. She nodded. Good. He waited. She added nothing. Finally he asked, that is it. Evelyn closed the rifle case completely and locked both latches. Then she looked once more at the digital clock mounted near the range office. Her expression did not change. 7 years is enough time to learn something important. Ryan waited again. She adjusted her cap and stepped away from the table. You usually meet experience before you recognize it. That is why people miss it. Then she started walking toward the registration area while half the range quietly watched her leave, and Ryan stood there convinced he had won an argument that had never actually started. By the time Evelyn reached the registration table, the atmosphere on the range had changed in a way nobody acknowledged out loud. Conversations continued, clipboards moved, gear was checked, but attention kept drifting back toward Lane 7. Ryan Mercer noticed it too. What bothered him was not that people had watched. It was that nobody had backed him up afterward. He signed the attendance sheet and glanced around. A staff sergeant from another company was standing near the coffee station. Ryan walked over casually. You know Carter? The man looked at him for half a second too long. Seen her around. That all. The answer came with a shrug. People do their jobs. Ryan waited for more. Nothing came. Another soldier passed behind them carrying hearing protection and quietly said, Morning, Master Sergeant, toward Evelyn as she crossed the range. She returned the greeting without stopping. No salute. No ceremony. Just recognition. Ryan frowned. He walked back toward Lane 7 and found 2 specialists setting up spotting scopes. Quick question, he said. What is her deal? One of them looked confused. Whose? Ryan nodded toward Evelyn. The specialist adjusted the tripod immediately. No idea, sir. Too fast. Too clean. Ryan had seen that before. It was the answer people gave when they knew something and preferred not to discuss it. His curiosity shifted into something sharper. He told himself this was professional. Leaders should understand the people around them. But under that was another feeling he did not examine too closely. He wanted to be right. Across the range, Evelyn had reopened her rifle case and was checking nothing at all. She moved with the same calm rhythm as before, touching equipment already aligned, verifying numbers she clearly remembered. She looked less like someone preparing and more like someone waiting. A loudspeaker clicked overhead. Attention, all personnel. Qualification sequence will begin in 20 minutes. Stand by for lane assignments. Soldiers started moving with purpose. Ryan looked toward Evelyn and made a decision. He walked directly back over. Several people noticed immediately without pretending otherwise this time. Ryan stopped beside the bench. Master Sergeant. She looked up. Lieutenant. He nodded once. I thought about what you said. Evelyn waited. About meeting experience before recognizing it. She closed the rifle case again. And Ryan kept his tone controlled. I think people also hide behind mystery when they want credit they did not earn. Silence. Somebody dropped a magazine on another lane, and even that sound seemed louder than normal. Evelyn rested both hands lightly on the bench. Do you think that is what this is? Ryan met her eyes. I think if someone has something to prove, qualification day is a good place to do it. For the first time all morning, she smiled. It was small and gone almost immediately. Not offended. Not impressed. Just curious. You want this to become a lesson. Ryan answered without hesitation. I want standards. She nodded slowly, as if accepting terms in a negotiation. Then she reached into her pocket, took out a folded lane card, and handed it to him. Ryan opened it. One line. Lane 7. Final demonstration rotation. Required observer, Lieutenant Mercer. He looked up. Evelyn had already turned away. As she adjusted her hearing protection, she said quietly enough that only he could hear. Good. Stay close then. Standards should be witnessed in person. Qualification rotations started exactly on schedule. Lanes filled one after another with the familiar rhythm of timers, instructions, and quiet concentration. People focused on targets, scores, and routines they had repeated for years. But Lane 7 drew attention without asking for it. Nobody gathered openly. Nobody wanted to look unprofessional. Yet every few minutes someone found a reason to walk nearby, check equipment, adjust hearing protection, or carry something that did not need carrying. Ryan Mercer stood at the observer station with the folded lane card still in his pocket. Required observer. The phrase bothered him more than he expected. Observers watch performance. They did not become part of it. Across from him, Evelyn Carter sat on a low equipment case with her hearing protection resting around her neck. She looked completely unaffected by the extra attention. No stretching, no pacing, no ritual, just stillness. Ryan checked the roster board. Her name appeared at the very end of the rotation. Final demonstration sequence. No explanation attached. He looked toward the range coordinator. What is demonstration sequence? The coordinator kept writing. You will see. Ryan waited for more. Nothing came. Lane after lane completed qualification. Good scores earned quiet nods. Average scores earned silence. One captain missed expectations and immediately requested another attempt. Nobody laughed. Nobody commented. The range had its own culture. Results spoke. Midway through the morning, Ryan glanced toward Evelyn again. She had not touched the rifle once. Instead, she watched people. Not casually. Deliberately. Like she was collecting information nobody else noticed. One shooter adjusted position after missing. Evelyn shifted her eyes before the correction happened. Another checked wind too late. She looked away before the result came back. Ryan finally walked over. You are not warming up? Evelyn looked at him. For what? He blinked. Your lane. She looked toward the targets. Those targets have never met me before. Warming up would not help them. He stared for half a second. You always answer like that? She considered it. Only when people ask unusual questions. Ryan almost smiled despite himself. Then he caught the expression and suppressed it. He remembered why he was here. You seem very comfortable for someone who has not qualified yet. Evelyn nodded once. That is true. He waited. She added nothing. A horn sounded overhead. The range coordinator stepped forward. Next sequence. Final demonstration rotation. Lane 7 prepare. Conversations dropped immediately. More people turned than they intended to. Ryan noticed that before he noticed something stranger. Several senior personnel who had not been present all morning had quietly appeared near the back fence. Nobody announced them. Nobody explained why they were there. Evelyn stood, picked up the rifle case. Nothing dramatic. Just one smooth movement. Ryan looked around again. Too many people suddenly interested. Too many people pretending not to care. He followed her to the firing position. She set the case down and checked the lane once. Then she turned toward him. Her voice stayed calm. Lieutenant. He straightened automatically. Yes. She adjusted one strap on the case and said, You wanted standards. She looked once toward the clock mounted over the range office. Then back at him. Watch carefully. This part usually happens fast. The range coordinator stepped to the center line and raised a tablet instead of the usual score sheet. That alone drew attention. Qualification days followed routine. Demonstration rotations did not. He looked across the lanes and spoke in a calm voice that somehow carried farther than shouting. Final event. Observation exercise. 1 volunteer shooter. 1 assigned shooter. Several people exchanged looks. Ryan Mercer frowned. Observation exercise was not part of standard qualification. The coordinator continued. Target package will appear at unknown distance. Wind values are active. Time window limited. He looked down briefly. Lieutenant Mercer, you are first. Ryan straightened immediately. Around him, heads turned. He had expected to observe, not participate. He glanced at Evelyn. She simply stepped aside and nodded toward the firing position. No expression, no satisfaction, no pressure, just space. Ryan took position behind the rifle already set for general configuration. A range assistant handed him a data card. He scanned it quickly. Multiple steel targets. Variable placement. Limited acquisition time. He had done harder drills before. He settled behind the optic. The loudspeaker clicked. A distant mechanical sound rolled across the field. Steel silhouettes appeared at staggered ranges. Ryan located the nearest one quickly, then the second, then realized something strange. Distances were changing on the display board faster than expected. The coordinator spoke again. You may engage after identification. Ryan adjusted. Checked. Calculated. Waited. He wanted to look composed. He knew people were watching. He selected a target and called it. The spotter confirmed. Ryan completed the sequence. 1 clean hit. 1 miss. 1 late adjustment. Nothing terrible. Nothing impressive. The timer ended. Ryan sat up and removed his hearing protection. The coordinator checked the tablet. Acceptable. No applause. No reaction. Ryan stood and looked toward Evelyn with quiet confidence returning. He handed the position back with a small shrug. Not impossible. Evelyn stepped forward and looked at the lane. No, it is not. She did not sit down. Instead, she asked the coordinator, same package? The coordinator looked at her for a second and nodded once. Same package. She turned to Ryan. Stay close. He crossed his arms. Trust me. I am watching. Evelyn placed the rifle down but did not settle behind it. She looked across the range once, then looked at the flags, then at the digital board, then nowhere at all for a moment. Ryan noticed something uncomfortable. She was not preparing the way he had prepared. She looked like she already knew something. The coordinator raised his hand. Ready? Evelyn asked 1 question. 3 seconds. He answered immediately. 3 seconds. Ryan looked between them. 3 seconds for what? Before he could ask, the coordinator pressed a button. The target field changed. New silhouettes appeared farther out than before. The clock above the range lit up red. 3. Evelyn moved. 2. She lowered into position with complete calm. 1. Her hand rested lightly on the rifle. She did not fire. She only looked through the optic once and quietly said, Interesting. Then she stood back up and stepped away from the firing line. Ryan stared at her. What are you doing? Evelyn removed 1 glove and looked at him. Now we know what this really is. Ryan stared at her for several seconds before realizing nobody else looked surprised. That bothered him more than anything that had happened all morning. People around the range were not confused. They were waiting. The coordinator lowered the tablet and walked toward lane 7. He stopped beside Evelyn and asked quietly, Confirm? She nodded once. That was not a shooting evaluation. The coordinator gave a small smile. Good. Ryan looked between them. What does that mean? Nobody answered immediately. Evelyn set the rifle back into the case and closed it without hurry. She turned and faced the target field again. Lieutenant, what did you see? Ryan frowned. Targets. What else? He thought for a second. Distance changes. Limited timing. She nodded. And he looked back toward the range. Then his expression shifted slightly. No wind call requirement. Evelyn looked at him for the first time with something close to approval. Better. She stepped toward the firing position and pointed toward the distant steel. Those targets were not difficult. Ryan folded his arms. Then why did you not take the shot? She asked calmly. Would you answer a question before understanding the question? He opened his mouth and stopped. She continued. The drill was never about precision. It was observation. The coordinator spoke for the first time. Most shooters fail because they rush. Ryan looked confused. Fail what? The coordinator turned the tablet around. On the screen were categories. Target recognition, wind awareness, position selection, pattern detection, decision quality. Shooting result appeared last. Ryan stared at the order. Shooting result carried the lowest score weight. He looked at Evelyn. She had known. She had known before the timer started. You recognized it immediately? Ryan asked. She nodded. 3 seconds was enough. A few nearby soldiers exchanged looks. One quietly muttered, "Of course it was." Ryan heard it. His stomach tightened slightly. Not embarrassment yet, just discomfort. Evelyn stepped beside the firing line again and looked through the optic for less than a second. Then she stood. Second target from left. Display unit recalibrated late. The coordinator checked his tablet. He raised an eyebrow. She continued. Crosswind changed after activation. Third silhouette shifted elevation approximately 6 inches. Timer started early by half a second. Nobody moved. The coordinator tapped the screen again. His expression changed. He looked at her and simply said, "Confirmed." Ryan looked at him immediately. How could she see that? The coordinator answered without drama. Because she was not trying to prove she could shoot. Silence settled over the lane. Evelyn picked up one glove and pulled it on slowly. Then she looked at Ryan. Her voice stayed calm. People focus on performance because performance is visible. She glanced once toward the targets. Experience notices the part before performance. Ryan did not answer. For the first time all morning, he stopped trying to measure her by rank. Around them, more people had gathered quietly near the back fence. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. Something had shifted, and Ryan could feel it before he understood it. Then the loudspeaker clicked again, and the coordinator said words that made the entire range go still. Proceed to recognition briefing. Personnel file authorization approved. The range stayed quiet after the announcement in a way Ryan had never experienced before. Military silence usually felt procedural. This felt different. Expectant. The coordinator lowered the tablet and stepped aside. Nobody moved toward the firing line. Nobody asked questions. Even the people who had arrived late near the back fence stopped pretending they were there by accident. Ryan looked around and realized something uncomfortable. Every person who seemed least surprised also seemed to outrank him. Evelyn Carter remained exactly where she had been standing, one hand resting lightly on the closed rifle case. No reaction to the announcement. No change in posture. Ryan finally broke the silence. Recognition briefing for what? The coordinator looked at him for a second, then at Evelyn. She gave the smallest nod. Permission. The coordinator tapped the tablet once. A display appeared on the large screen beside the range office. No dramatic music. No classified warning. Just a personnel profile opening line by line. Name: Carter, Evelyn. Rank: Master Sergeant. Current assignment: training and evaluation support. Ryan looked immediately at Evelyn. Training support. He almost felt relieved. Then more lines appeared. Additional duty designation. Long-range assessment advisor. Special certification status. Observer authorization level elevated. Ryan frowned. That was unusual. Then another line loaded. Instructor qualification, restricted circulation. The coordinator kept reading. Authorized to conduct performance validation for officer candidates and advanced marksmanship leadership review. Ryan stared. Performance validation. His stomach tightened. He looked around again. Nobody looked surprised. The coordinator continued. Service recommendation history available by request only. Then he stopped reading and simply turned the tablet around. The screen displayed numbers. Not awards. Not medals. Years. Evaluation cycles. Training classes. Units supported. Officer review boards completed. Ryan scanned quickly. He stopped counting after the first page. His expression changed slowly rather than all at once. Evelyn had never been there to qualify. She had been there to observe. The realization landed quietly and somehow felt heavier because of it. Ryan looked at her. You evaluated me? Evelyn answered simply. Partially. He blinked. Since when? She thought for a moment. Probably since you asked why my rank was not higher. Nobody laughed. Nobody needed to. Ryan remembered every conversation from that morning and suddenly heard them differently. Every answer she gave. Every pause. Every question she returned instead of answering. None of it had been defensive. She had not argued once. She had just watched. Ryan looked at the screen again. Why stay at this rank? Several people nearby glanced at Evelyn immediately. She looked toward the distant targets before answering. Different jobs required different places. Ryan stared at her. You turn promotions down? She shrugged once. Sometimes leadership looks different than people expect. The coordinator closed the file. Master Sergeant Carter requested reduced visibility assignments 6 years ago. Ryan looked back at her. 6 years. He had spent all morning assuming he understood what experience looked like. Evelyn picked up the rifle case and started walking away from lane 7. Then she stopped and looked back at him. Her voice stayed calm. Lieutenant Mercer. He straightened automatically. She nodded once toward the range. You asked for standards. Tomorrow morning, same time. Bring questions instead of conclusions. Ryan remained standing long after Evelyn walked away. Around him, the range slowly returned to motion, but not to normal. Conversations restarted at lower volume. People moved again. Yet something had changed in the way they looked at lane 7. Nobody treated it like a performance area anymore. It felt more like a classroom after a difficult lesson. Ryan looked once more toward the closed personnel screen. Training and evaluation support. Performance validation. Reduced visibility assignment. None of those words sounded dramatic. That was the strange part. Nothing revealed about Evelyn felt theatrical. There had been no secret title. No impossible story. Just years of work he never thought to imagine because he had stopped looking after rank. He stood there for another minute before turning toward the range coordinator. Why did nobody say anything? The coordinator adjusted paperwork without looking up. Nobody asked. Ryan frowned. People knew. The coordinator nodded once. Some did. Ryan looked toward the direction Evelyn had gone. And nobody corrected me. The coordinator finally looked at him. Correcting people rarely teaches them much. Ryan had no answer for that. He walked slowly across the range and found an empty bench near the target charts. For the first time that day, he replayed every conversation in order. Her warning, her questions, the way she never defended herself, the way she kept asking what he noticed instead of telling him what he missed. He realized something uncomfortable. She had given him multiple exits. He had ignored all of them. A shadow crossed the bench. Ryan looked up. One of the senior officers who had appeared earlier stopped beside him. Colonel James Holloway. Ryan stood immediately. The colonel motioned for him to sit. He remained standing himself. After a few seconds, he asked, "You know why people respect Master Sergeant Carter?" Ryan answered honestly, "Because she is experienced." The colonel smiled faintly. "No." Ryan looked surprised. The colonel continued, "Experience gets attention. Character keeps respect." He looked toward the empty firing lane. People trust her because she never uses what she knows to make other people feel small. Ryan looked down briefly. The colonel noticed, but said nothing. After a moment, he added, "You are not the first officer to misread her." Ryan looked up. "Really?" Holloway nodded. Difference is most people never realize they did. He started walking away, then stopped. Tomorrow morning. 0700. She does not invite many people twice. Then he left. Ryan sat there alone with the noise of the range in the background. He reached into his pocket and unfolded the lane card again. Required observer. Suddenly the phrase meant something different. He turned the card over. There was handwriting on the back he had not noticed before. One line only. Observation begins before the scope. Ryan looked at the words for a long time. Then he folded the card carefully and put it away. Across the range, he saw Evelyn in the distance carrying her rifle case toward the parking area. She never looked back. She did not need to. For the first time that day, Ryan realized he was not trying to prove her wrong anymore. He was trying to understand how many people he had underestimated before he met her. The next morning, Ryan Mercer arrived at the range at 6:48. 12 minutes early. Not because anyone had ordered him to. Not because he thought punctuality would repair anything. He simply did not want to arrive after her. The morning air was cool and quiet. No crowd. No observers. No special setup. Just empty lanes, distant flags, and the low mechanical hum of a place waking up. Evelyn Carter was already there. Not at the firing line. She stood near the fence holding a paper cup of coffee and watching the sunrise over the far ridge. No rifle case. No equipment. Ryan walked over and stopped a few feet away. She glanced at him once. "You are early." He nodded. "I had questions." She took another sip. "Good." He waited. She did not continue. Finally, he asked, "Why did you not correct me yesterday?" She looked toward the range. "About what?" Ryan let out a quiet breath. "Everything." Evelyn considered the question longer than he expected. Then she said, "Because people remember what they discover more than what they are told." Ryan looked down briefly. "You knew what I was doing." She nodded. Pretty quickly. He gave a short laugh without humor. "That obvious?" She answered immediately. Not unusual. He looked at her. That happens often. She thought for a moment. Less than before. Ryan smiled faintly. That is not comforting. She smiled once. Small. Real. Then she turned and leaned lightly against the fence. Lieutenant, you were not disrespectful because you asked questions. He looked up. She continued. You became unfair when you decided the answer before you looked. The words stayed in the air longer than she intended. Ryan nodded slowly. He had replayed every conversation from the day before and realized she was right. He had not been curious. He had been measuring. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded lane card. Observation begins before the scope. He held it up. You wrote this? Evelyn nodded. He looked at the words again. How long did it take you to learn that? She looked out across the empty range. Long enough to stop caring who gets credit. Silence returned. Comfortable this time. Ryan finally asked the question that had stayed with him all night. Do you ever regret staying where you are? Evelyn looked surprised for the first time. Not offended. Just thoughtful. She shook her head. People think rank is a destination. She looked at him. Sometimes it is just a location. Ryan stood quietly for a moment. Then he did something simple. He straightened his posture, met her eyes, and said, Master Sergeant Carter, yesterday I assumed things I did not earn the right to assume. She waited. He continued. I was wrong. She looked at him for a second and then nodded once. No speech. No lesson. No dramatic acceptance. Just a nod. Then she set down the empty cup and started walking toward the range entrance. After a few steps, she stopped and looked back. One more thing. Ryan waited. She said, next time you meet someone impressive, do not try to identify them in 3 seconds. She smiled slightly. Ask better questions. Then she walked away while the morning light spread across the empty lanes, and Ryan remained standing there with a folded lane card in his hand and a lesson he knew he would remember much longer than any score he had ever earned.